Hi, and welcome to the session on personal values. And this is a really key one that I would often do with the majority of my clients, to be honest, in that it's important for you to reflect on who you are as a person and what's most important to you. We often go through life in a very busy, hectic, chaotic way, and we don't stop to appreciate or even realize what actually is driving us, what motivates us. And a lot of that can be pulled from your personal values. So I would tell people repeatedly that you are not going to contradict your personal values. So if you believe that having integrity is really important, or being honest is really important, those kind of things are going to play out in your everyday and working life. Equally, if you're very competitive, that's going to be a theme that's going to run throughout as well. And often, once we realize what are important to us, we can see how they shape our lives and how we then make decisions as a result. We very, very seldom would contradict our values. So throughout your life, you won't necessarily turn them on their head. You will go with them. And if you're looking for a partner, for instance, somebody that mirrors those values is going to be a better match than somebody who doesn't share those at all with you. So it's that kind of thing that's really important, and something we, like I said, we don't spend enough time on doing. So what I'll do is I'll share my screen with you so you can see what I'm referring to. So here we have the list. Quite essentially, it is just that. And what I explain to clients is this isn't an exhaustive list. People could add to it, obviously, as they see fit. But these are really good prompts for people. Now, when I'm talking to clients, I say to them, you might want to grade them, maybe out of 5, maybe out of 10, really just so you can appreciate how you prioritize. So, for example, you might feel that you are competitive. However, it may not be a fundamental factor. So, for example, I would class myself as quite competitive in sports, for example, but in the working environment, not so much. And that might be because I don't have the ambition that we see later as another quality. So my competitiveness is certainly there, but it's not a 5 out of 5. Economic security, whether you value that. So some people are really considerate savers, and some people just spend as they earn, because some people value having money in the bank and other people don't worry about that. So you can see the list. You've got spirituality again. So some people might not necessarily feel that they're religious, but they certainly have some kind of beliefs. Order, whether you feel you're organized, whether you like things in a certain way. Advancement, so as I mentioned, if you're quite ambitious, you would look for that in your life. You might want to better your house, better your car, those kind of things. So that might be important to you. Freedom, whether you value that. So again, it might be important to you, but it might not have a high value. For others who might have been in very claustrophobic environments, they might value that quite highly. So we've got achievement, family happiness, service, helping others, loyalty, integrity, friendship, responsibility, personal development, whether you value that, whether it's important to you that you invest a lot of time in yourself and your own mental health, well-being, education, etc. Inner harmony is quite an interesting one, and it's almost not about how, it's about how you interpret that. So whether it's important that you have that inner calm, or whether actually you run off stress and you quite like the franticness and you feel more empowered if you're running on fumes. Again, that wouldn't be my choice, because I feel that's quite stress inducing. But for some people, that is something that they really value, and they would find inner harmony equates to boredom, and that's not necessarily something that they would value. Cooperation, creativity, recognition, how important that is to you, whether you need to feel valued, rewarded at work and in the home. Health, wisdom, adventure, wealth, affection. So all of those things, whether you value them 5 out of 5 or 10 out of 10 or somewhere in the middle, it's just useful really to have a think about what those values, and indeed what other values you might think are really, really important. So, for example, if you have a strong religion, that might itself come with a series of values. And I think if I can, I'll just go to so what I will do is I'll show you in greater context. That was just the list, and that is a list I would use quite frequently, but it also comes as a document, which again you might find useful to use. So one of the things when discussing with clients about their values, they often come to me because they're feeling overwhelmed. And if you are feeling frustrated, you have a low mood, you're feeling overwhelmed, you're feeling lost, lacking direction, often you'll end up in, opposite me or with some kind of therapist. And one of the key things that we would look at is your work-life balance. Because again, so many people neglect that. They go to work, they fill up their family life, they fill up their social life, and they find themselves living a very chaotic life where food takes a hit, sleep takes a hit, and all those fundamental things that we should perhaps invest more time in become sidelines, become incidentals. We're drinking our coffee on the way to work, we're snacking in a lay-by, we're not getting enough sleep because we're catching up on important TV programs. So your work-life balance is really, really critical. And even if you're really ambitious, to only live for work can be quite narrowing and unfulfilling at the end of the day. So, having a go through this work-life balance self-assessment, rating yourself from 1 to 10, where 1 is poor and 10 is excellent. So I have clear goals for my professional life and I regularly review these. So having a chance to look forward is a practical tool and usually quite useful as a direction. If you are so narrow in that your goals are very rigid, that might be something that you could then work on later. I have clear goals for my personal life and regularly review these. People don't think they should have personal goals. And I used to tell my clients how, especially after my first marriage broke apart, I had to have personal goals because I wanted children. I wanted to get back into that sort of married, settled environment where I could bring children into the world. And if you don't see your vision, if you can't, you find yourself not actioning it, it becomes amazing how many people would love to meet a partner, but actually they do very little about it. Well, people don't just turn up on your doorstep and say, hi, I'm Mr. Right or Mrs. Right. You have to find them or put yourself into positions where you will meet people. So having goals for your personal life, it could be meeting somebody or your health or wealth, is equally important. I have developed good systems for managing my time. So back to this balance, how do you allocate time throughout the day? Monitoring how you use your time, whether you can see the overall picture or whether, again, you're feeling so overwhelmed that you can't see it. I'm reasonably well disciplined. I am calm most of the time. I'm able to carry out difficult actions and I'm happy with my work-life balance. So by going through all of those and grading those out of 10, you'll soon see whether there are areas that you could improve on or whether there are areas you're actually doing very well on, which again, we need to focus on both. So that's the first page. The list is next, as I went through it previously. So that again would be something that I would tend to let clients go away and think about because they're not necessarily things you instantly recognize or know. And then the third sheet, and this is almost as if you were going to work through it on your own, is about setting personal goals. So what should be a goal. How do you set it? This ties in with the action plan about writing down your goals. If we write something down, we are much more likely to achieve it. It's a bit like a shopping list. If you don't have a shopping list, you can walk around the supermarket and just pick up things you fancy, maybe things you don't need, and maybe spend more than you want to. So actually writing down your goals is just the same. You're writing down something because then you know exactly what you're looking for, and you'll know when you've achieved it or not. As with the action plan, it also goes into explaining how you break down those ambitions, those goals into things that are smaller. So whatever you're doing, it doesn't seem an overwhelming task in itself. So if it is indeed for losing weight, you break that down into a realistic goal of a year, and then you break that down into smaller chunks. Because again, for something like losing weight is such a common personal goal for people, and yet their expectations are, £1 or £2 a week. Well, that might be great, and indeed you can achieve those kind of weight loss goals, but it would come with some serious dieting, and that's not a lifestyle change. So with all diets, once you stop doing and stop being that disciplined, which in most cases is labelled in weeks, most months, because it's not sustainable long term, that then you end up putting the weight back on because you've not bedded them in as lifestyle changes. You've just taken it on, which is fine if you're just doing it to go on holiday. But if you are seriously about getting healthier, it's a long-term goal with some long-term aims that you really need to be focused on. And finally, some strategies about managing your time. A lot of my clients will say, well, I haven't got time to do this, I haven't got time to do that. But it's amazing where the time goes. So, how much time are you investing in social media? How much time are you investing in commuting? What are you actually doing from the minute you wake up to the minute you go to bed? And how are you utilising those hours and minutes? So it's a little bit on saying no, because if you are, there is a cliche saying, but it's very true, if you want something done, give it to a busy person. Well, that's why, because the busy person will just put it back on their pile and they'll be working through everything on their list. So being able to say no, knowing that no is not a dirty word. It's fine to not be able to take on all these tasks at once. Prioritizing, scheduling, doing a to-do list. It's incredible how people think, oh, you're so organized. But it's a list. How can your brain remember everything to do unless you write it down? So, lists are really important. Resistance. Most of us resist doing many things during the day, but it is worth trying to do at least some of these things first rather than last. So if there are things that you have been putting off, that's what this resistance is referring to. So that clearing out of that cupboard, set yourself a time that you're going to do it and allocate it as a small amount. So I'm only going to spend 30 minutes on a Saturday morning clearing out that cupboard, and then I'm going to stop and move on to something else. You'll be amazed at how much you get done in 30 minutes. You might then feel justified in allocating an hour, but because you've only given yourself a target of 30 minutes, you will have achieved that. And then you can say, right, okay, I've done some of that. Clearly there's more work. Okay, I'll continue that next Saturday for 30 minutes. And again, within weeks, that cupboard that you have not touched for months and potentially years will get cleared. And the reward from achieving those things is incredible. So the next sheet is effective delegation, because we often do too much ourselves. So that is how you can achieve results but not doing it alone. So how do you delegate effectively? For example, selecting the right person, consulting them, again, being clear about the objectives, the goals, the deadlines. And this even applies around the house. If you want people to help you with the housework or the gardening, the same approach is applicable. When you're asked for help, coach the person. So don't necessarily delegate and walk away, but delegate with support. Evaluate. So if somebody's doing something really well, that should be noted. Equally, if they're struggling, what could be improved? And really just working through those potential problems. And finally, if you really need it, there is a time log. So, there's lots of time emotion studies. Your phones can tell you how much time you spent on things. But again, sometimes we don't really appreciate. We think we have no time in the day, and yet we have spent a lot of time, for example, on social media. We spent a lot of time watching, our soap operas, or driving, or doing certain things. And it's one of those things that we perhaps don't appreciate until we see it written down. So hopefully, all of those things will enable you to really recognize what your personal values are. Because as I said, they guide us through life, in work, home life, leisure, everything. So once you recognize them, that can really steer you differently, value things differently, and hopefully, ultimately, if your work-life balance isn't very good, as you would have identified on one of the other sheets, then what you can do about it hopefully will be explained further with those other pages as well. Do it. It's really good exercise, and it can certainly help you start to address why you might feel overwhelmed, why you might feel like you're lacking direction, and certainly give you some food for thought about what you might change. Good luck.